In our last video, we talked about how slowing down in silence can lead to a greater appreciation for the gifts that God has given us. Not just nature, but in the entirety of His creation, our homes, our families, and in the beautiful creatures that live here with us. Now that we understand how we can connect with God in a relationship, we also have to understand what separates us from Him.
The creation accounts in the book of Genesis contain profound teachings about human existence and its historical reality. They suggest that human life is grounded in three fundamental and closely intertwined relationships with God, with our neighbor, and with the earth itself. According to the Bible, these three vital relationships have been broken, both outwardly and within us. This rupture is sin. The harmony between the Creator, humanity, and creation as a whole was disrupted by our presuming to take the place of God and refusing to acknowledge our creaturely limitations. This, in turn, distorted our mandate to have dominion over the earth, to till it and keep it. As a result, the original harmonious relationships between human beings and nature became conflictual. It is significant that the harmony which St. Francis of Assisi experienced with all creatures was seen as a healing of that rupture. St. Bonaventure held that, through universal reconciliation with every creature, St. Francis in some way returned to the state of original innocence. This is a far cry from our situation today, where sin is manifest in all its destructive powers in wars, the various forms of violence and abuse, the abandonment of the most vulnerable, and attacks on nature.
A spirituality which forgets God as all-powerful and creator is not acceptable. That is how we end up worshiping earthly powers or ourselves, usurping the place of God, even to the point of claiming an unlimited right to trample His creation underfoot. When human beings place themselves at the center, they give absolute priority to immediate convenience. All else becomes relative. Hence, we should not be surprised to find, in conjunction with the omnipresent technocratic paradigm and the cult of unlimited human power, the rise of a relativism, which sees everything as irrelevant unless it serves one's own immediate interests. There is a logic in all this whereby different attitudes can feed on one another, leading to environmental degradation and social decay, as well as a number of other sins, such as human trafficking, organized crime, the drug trade, commerce in blood diamonds, and the fur of endangered species. Buying the organs of the poor for resale or use in experimentation, or eliminating children because they are not what their parents wanted.
And so the converse is true as well. A sense of deep communion with the rest of nature cannot be real if our hearts lack tenderness, compassion, and concern for our fellow human beings. It is clearly inconsistent to combat trafficking in endangered species while remaining completely indifferent to human trafficking, unconcerned about the poor, or undertaking to destroy another human being deemed unwanted. This compromises the very meaning of our struggle for the sake of the environment. It is no coincidence that, in the canticle in which St. Francis praises God for His creatures, he goes on to say, "Praise be you, my Lord, through those who give pardon for your love." Everything is connected. Concern for the environment thus needs to be joined to a sincere love for human beings and an unwavering commitment to resolving the problems of society.
In awareness of the connectedness of all sin, we must therefore learn to recognize when any creation of God has been exploited. Just as Jesus models for us how to approach those people living in the margins of our society, we must be reborn in an ecological conversion so that our eyes are open to sins of waste in those margins, in resources, energy, and labor. Usually, when these sins are present, then we will also find brothers and sisters whose dignity is being robbed from them as well. In 2016, my wife and I were patiently waiting in this hotel room overlooking the Gan River in Nanchang, China. We watched as gigantic shipping barges trolled alongside swimmers who were swimming upstream just to tread water, picking green weeds from the bottom of the riverbed. These weeds were one of the only natural vegetables found in the local food, and it came from the same riverbed which, every day, conveyed tons of the world's goods into the Yangtze, the longest river in Asia, and then to Shanghai. My ecological conversion came at the same time as my calling to become a father again. A calling of my faith, which culminated in this very hotel room. Seeing the city that breathes this smog-filled air and eats and drinks from the same water as every ship that has carried any number of goods that I have purchased in my life is a reminder for me that I am contributing to miscarriages, premature births, disabilities, and even abortions, all of which are at least 3 times higher in China than in the USA. And a large contributor to this statistic is environmental degradation from acting as the world's factory. My own son was miraculously saved from the shadows of death in the streets surrounding this hotel, a death which would have been caused by his genetic mutation, of which environmental toxicity is likely a cause. But God had another plan for him, and for my wife and I, when we met him on this day in China. I am forever changed. To be pro-life doesn't mean that you choose to care about either the unborn, the foreigner, the sick, the poor, or God's creation. It's not an either-or choice. Rather, it means that you care for all life. As a part of awareness of the sins on creation, we must also begin to ask questions. Questions like, why do people suffer? What is causing their suffering? How do I contribute to the exploitation of resources or people? Why do we always desire more? And when do I place more trust in my belongings and wealth than in God?
Christian spirituality proposes an alternative understanding of the quality of life and encourages a prophetic and contemplative lifestyle, one capable of deep enjoyment, free of the obsession with consumption. We need to take up an ancient lesson found in different religious traditions and also in the Bible. It is the conviction that less is more. A constant flood of new consumer goods can baffle the heart and prevent us from cherishing each thing in each moment. To be serenely present to each reality, however small it may be, opens us to much greater horizons of understanding and personal fulfillment. Christian spirituality proposes a growth marked by moderation and the capacity to be happy with little. It is a return to that simplicity which allows us to stop and appreciate the small things, to be grateful for the opportunities which life affords to us, to be spiritually detached from what we possess, and not to succumb to sadness for what we lack. This implies avoiding the dynamic of dominion and the mere accumulation of pleasures.
Only by cultivating sound virtues will people be able to make a selfless ecological commitment. A person who could afford to spend and consume more, but regularly uses less heating and wears warmer clothing instead, shows the kind of convictions and attitudes which help to protect the environment. There is a nobility in the duty to care for creation through little daily actions. And it is wonderful how education can bring about real changes in lifestyle. Education in environmental responsibility can encourage ways of acting which directly and significantly affect the world around us, such as avoiding the use of plastic and paper, reducing water consumption, separating refuse, cooking only what can be reasonably consumed, showing care for other living beings, using public transport or carpooling, planting trees, turning off unnecessary lights, or any number of practices. All of these reflect a generous and worthy creativity which brings out the best in human beings. Reusing something instead of immediately discarding it, when done for the right reasons, can be an act of love which expresses our own dignity. One of the first attitude changes that our family underwent after my ecological conversion was the idea that we did not need to have 2 cars in our family. We sold 1 car and I drove to work every day, or my wife would take me to work and we would have family time together on the way to work. It was a change for our family that took some sacrifice and some more planning on our part. But in the end, we were able to spend more time together and we were able to reduce our footprint on this world. So with this, some reflection questions that we should have for our families. What habits do I need to let go of in order to serve God more fully in this world? What habits can I form that would cultivate sound virtues of selfless commitment to my neighbors and to our common home? And how can I amend my life such that it is one of simplicity, free of selfish consumption?
Sobriety and humility were not favorably regarded in the last century, and yet when there is a general breakdown in the exercise of a certain virtue in personal and social life, it ends up causing a number of imbalances, including environmental ones. That is why it is no longer enough to speak only of the integrity of ecosystems. We have to dare to speak of the integrity of human life, of the need to promote and unify all the great values. Once we lose our humility and become enthralled with the possibility of limitless mastery over everything, we inevitably end up harming society and the environment. It is not easy to promote this kind of healthy humility or happy sobriety when we consider ourselves autonomous, when we exclude God from our lives or replace him with our own ego and think that our subjective feelings can define what is right and what is wrong.